you to the August meeting of the Space Association of Australia. I'm Peter Allen, the President, and Michael Abdilla, the Vice President, and the main meeting coordinator. We're going to get started really quickly tonight because our special guest, Dr. Sarah Pell, is on the way to the airport, and the graciously decided to stop in and share some time with us. So we've got a very limited amount of time. There might be an opportunity later on to be able to ask Sarah some questions when she's at the airport itself, so we'll try and work it out on Skype or something like that. So if you have questions, hold them until later. We will filter them. There will be no prizes. But anyway, I'm just going to be quickly. So, there you go. I don't believe that. So, Dr. Sarah Jane Pell is an Australian artist, researcher, and occupational diver. Her works combine the traditions of performance, art, and human factors with underwater habitat and occupational diving technology, and a whole bunch of other things that I just don't have time to read out. Probably the best thing is to hand over to Dr. Sarah Jane Pell.
Thank you so much. Wait. Yes? That's better. Oh, I'm jumping now. We might get this fixed. It's an introduction for comp one to use the handheld. Oh, there we go. It's an art in space. There we go. I need to somewhere else. No. Okay. Is this better? So while we have a great tradition of art in space and space in art, what I'm really interested in is looking at the notion of an artist-astronaut. And by that, I'm talking about the opportunities or the new opportunities with access to space. When we're talking about civilian access to space, and we're being trained as citizen scientists in space, that we could also look at the research opportunities for the artist-astronaut, different types of researchers accessing and utilising space. So to give you a brief introduction, I began with a background in performance art, looking at ways to use my body and space and technology to talk about our relationship to living systems, be those closed-loop life support systems, limited atmospheres, reciprocal, or the politics of sharing air. For instance, this is a dual rebreather used by two people in an emergency situation. And incorporating these prototype technologies into performance works to talk about the biopolitics of the body in space and time. And a lot of that was referencing the work I was doing underwater. So, as a commercial diver, I was interested in the way the body is confronting itself and the environment. And these types of apparatus enable me to contain not only my body and my respiration, but to encapsulate something of that performance for an audience quite literally. This was a failed attempt, somewhat, but a rather poetic failed attempt, to create or externalize a self-contained rebreather using the shape or the biometrics of the body external to the apparatus. So, for instance, the scrubber was in the shape of a heart, the bellows were in the shape of the lungs, and so on. And I performed this underwater, where the system worked quite effectively because it requires great cooling. But as soon as I started to walk on land, the soda soil started to absorb moisture and condensation. The system got very hot, and it wasn't particularly effective at all, and I had to add oxygen. So these are the types of live experiments that I was conducting. I was also conducting poetic experiments underwater as artworks, such as wearing Leonardo da Vinci wings, which are obviously designed for flight, referencing myself as a kind of a feminine Icarus, if you like, underwater, wearing high heels because why not? My legs were obsolete in this type of form and function. But recognizing too that the wings, while the width of the wing was enormous, created enormous drag that I almost couldn't power with it to flap. If, however, I pulled my wings back as you would a bird in flight or diving bird, that they were incredibly efficient and I could dive almost and hardly pull out of the dive. They were that efficient. So all of this creative and poetic work is actually referenced and supported by work in industry. Occupational work, a very glamorous type of work that you do as an occupational diver, usually in black water, usually involving construction and technology and all those kinds of glamorous things. But it enabled me to have a lot of skills that I could then transfer in the arts, whether that was learning how to weld, to sculpt, or to understand the way that my body moved so that I could position myself and objects underwater. I also used this as an education and outreach opportunity to connect the world of diving to the world of art. And I was interested in relating these systems and enabling others to experience them as well. So one of the early projects that I worked on was actually contained within a lifeboat, one that is used in an offshore vessel in the northern hemisphere. And contained within that was a biotechnology and art laboratory, where we were taking specimens and samples from visitors who were psychologically and biometrically profiling people and creating a meta-DNA and a metadata collection of the people processing and coming through. So essentially I was using the language of science and technology to create a critique of those systems and how they related to us and our normal day-to-day lives. So in a way I was looking at the microscopic and then using my performance process to create that on a macro scale. So here, if this is a little ambiguous, this is me inside a life-size Petri dish. And I'm set with a gel medium. I am obviously the specimen of my own research here. I'm critiquing something of that which I feel underwater, from a body of water contained within a body of water, and my respiration becomes unified with that body of water. So in this instance, it's amplified so the audience hears that cadence. So in addition to that work, I worked in remote areas in Tasmania for about 4 years, working in a zero visibility, a black water harbour, learning how to perform and move underwater repetitively without sight, so that everything became second nature. This was fundamental for me transitioning my practice and understanding something of, I used to call it a self-contained or self-imposed residency, because in my mind I was preparing or imagining that I was heading to space. But then I was lucky to go to both the International Space University and to Singularity University to look at all sorts of exponential technology and to look at ways in which people were trying to solve grand challenges, both in space, but also in areas such as water technology, energy, and so on, and how collectively these were in helping to build a future scenario that in fact might solve some of these challenges. I also started working on EVA simulations underwater, working at NASA Ames, working with astronaut Dan Barry, creating these scenarios underwater, so that when I came back to Australia, I could lead underwater EVA simulation training here, and developing workshops with students, graduate students from the International Space University, including Korean astronaut candidates who unlike us, are not taught to swim at schools. So they need these opportunities to develop these skills. In addition to working underwater, these groups had a remote live mission control. So these events would take place over a number of the days to create a build or to build or to undertake a procedure where, in this case, instead of the Canadian arm, they were building the down underarm that had to work and shine an AMS on something in order for them to complete the procedure and to head back to the hatch. Of course, if anyone wasn't tethered, they were lost in space, and the crew had to egress, and another crew would have to come and continue their work. So this was a blending of art and science that has continued, where I'm using my work and my body underwater as an analogue to space. Some of the other work that I've undertaken here in Australia was with the Exertion Games Lab, where I created a fleet of autonomous and networked robots or aquabots, which I called explorer fish. And these spherical robots were covered in a beautiful silicon tentacle-shaped swimsuit that enabled them to have traction in the water. One of the earlier designs for that was in separating a mother fish out from the so-called baby fish. So any interaction with the mother fish would enable the other fish to mimic that motion or movement. The idea was, that it was demonstrating in isolation what could have happened in a bigger body of water once they had some awareness of each other. The idea or notion is that they could school together as a school of fish and show the motion of a bigger underwater object, in which case I hoped at some point that bigger underwater object would in fact become me. So what I was designing was an underwater robot that could link to sensors on my body so that my motion could trigger an entire school of fish to perform and move with me. And I created some opportunities for ballet lab, the dancers here, to work underwater and to work with the beautiful little explorer fish with the view that one day we could create an underwater choreography, other space analog environments. So with the exertion games, I looked at how the body translates into higher altitude. And in 2015, I set the challenge to undertake an expedition to Mount Everest with the view of creating artwork at various stages of a summit attempt and revisiting those spaces over the acclimatization process, up and down, sending signs of life to an audience and also understanding the biometrics and the performance of the body during that expedition. Now, things were going reasonably well, but on day 11, I had 3 of my team members suffer altitude sickness and had to be evacuated out. And my expedition lead got dengue fever and was repatriated back to India. And I went alone on my first ever Everest attempt with a Sherpa, solo. But don't worry, I got to Everest Base Camp, and it was day 13. And I was then told by the climbing company that I no longer qualified for a group permit because my group were no longer there. I needed to find, well, another 21,000 US or something for a solo permit, and they hadn't yet got the Wi-Fi infrastructure ready and up. So I was certainly challenged. Now that evening, I actually had an incredible epiphany, if you like, a beautiful experience. We're there sleeping on the glacier for the first time. I recognized that I wasn't actually there to climb a mountain. I was there to climb its gown. I was there again engaged with another body of water. And sleeping on the glacier, feeling it respire and move beneath me was incredible. And it was actually like, and even hearing the avalanches was like listening to the white noise of the waves crashing. And it was so peaceful and beautiful and reassuring. And I could not have known that actually, several days later, I actually survived the Nepal earthquakes that year. And my project didn't go according to plan. But no truer intent about sending signs of life and expressing personal experience from an expeditionary site could be true. So that kind of, it shocked me. It completely ruptured my world. But at the same time, it reinforced that mission and that requirement for having both the technologies and the abilities to do that during expedition. So as a way of processing that, I came back and made a crazy science fiction film. This was set at VSEC. So in exploring a kind of an ancient setting, a Mars setting, where the landscape didn't shift, what was shifting was me and my performance. So the work which was called We Are All Explorer Fish featured me actually breathing in from a leftover drill hole from a Mars rover some tiny amount of dew, getting a little bit hypoxic, and I guess hallucinating in the space, and having an encounter in an ancient seabed with the explorer fish that I saw, this fish dreaming, which made me rupture and flap about. And it was one way of processing. But when I got back to Australia, I said, what is it that I really want to do, and how do I really want to work this? And this was what I came up with, this statement here. I seek morphosis to transit from sea to summit to space fluidly and eventually simultaneously. Will you help me? I have insurance. Now, I actually sent that off as a grant application to the Australia Council for a fellowship. Admittedly, there was a bit more work behind it than that. But it was successful, and I have support for 2 years of performing astronautics. So this gives me a chance to look back on what I have done. I've worked in all kinds of simulations. I've worked in flight. I've worked underwater. I've worked in virtual technologies and in operational scenarios. And now I have a chance to train for civilian astronautics. So in Yuri's Night 2016, I qualified as an astronaut candidate for Project Possum. I was undertaking hyperbaric chamber operations for slow decompression. I was undertaking aerobatic flights with the Paddy Wagstaff School of Acrobatics. And of course adding a little personal touch. So in this instance, wearing a blue screen suit, should I ever want to change that in a cinematic film version so that perhaps like a chameleon, you can see the expression of what I'm experiencing inside on the outside. I also started to work for Final Frontier Designs, undertaking spacesuit validation flights. And in this case, this is the new IVA suit, the intravehicular activity suit designed specifically for suborbital flight. So of course, this is an amazing opportunity to not only test things like dexterity and operational things, comfort, cooling systems, flow systems, but also the integration with the seat that's being designed and so on. And of course, it feels a little bit victorious. But in that, I've also had the opportunity to add complexity to this. My interest as an artist-astronaut candidate is to do something a little bit different with these opportunities, to not only use them for education and outreach, but to talk about the inner experience, that which we never hear of, or hear of after the fact, not in the moment, because there's a lot going on. So in 2016, I added a complexity to this again, and I delivered a TEDx Melbourne talk while I was doing a spacesuit validation flight, which was certainly challenging, juggling all of the requirements for that. But it led to new things, and I also then started to work with the European project called Project Moonwalk. And this was really a culmination of all my skills, where I began to work with an EVA simulation spacesuit. This is the Gandolfi 2, developed by the COMEX in Marseille, and their beautiful lunar lander here in a night EVA simulation. And I undertook a range of work both in the COMEX pool with a consortium of 7 research partners from about 8 different nations. And they had been working on the project from 2013 to 2016. I joined them simply as a simulation astronaut. In terms of their framework, it was rather interesting. I was a safety or security diver until I got inside the suit, and then I was a research subject. But it was kind of nice. So the nature of Project Moonwalk was specifically to understand and explore human-robotic cooperation for both Moon and Mars analogues. They chose the Mars analogue was in Spain, in the desert in Spain. I can't think, Rio Tinto. And the EVA simulation for the lunar analogue in the 1/6 gravity of the Moon was actually out in the open ocean. So the robot that I cooperated with was quite a simple robot called Yemo. It wasn't really the star of the show, so it didn't need to be particularly sophisticated. What was more important was the interoperability and the systems for supporting that engagement. So I used a lot of gesture control, but it had a lot of machine learning. It could work autonomously and it could be operated by mission control. And I undertook a lot of surface work using geosampling tools and so on. And these, in fact, were 3D printed by Liquify Systems space architects in Austria. So once I got to the ocean, it was an incredible kind of babushka experience. Here am I inside a dive suit, inside a life support system, inside a space suit, inside a body of water, communicating with ROVs, a rover, a dive team, a mission control, a comms team, a Capcom, you name it. And it was a great experience. So moving forward, I've been working on space egress and post-flight landing scenarios, developing sea survival skills, which I have done before and undertaken before as a commercial diver, but now doing them wearing obviously equipment and going through scenarios particular to suborbital flight. So just to go back to Project Possum for a moment, the specific nature of POSSUM, it stands for Polar Suborbital Science in the Upper Mesosphere. And its mission is an aeronomy mission, primarily. This red camera is designed to take long-range tomography of a noctilucent cloud. They also extend a little antenna to take samples of this cloud, which we think are made of tiny ice crystals in the mesosphere. They're occurring in frequency, increasing in frequency and vibrancy at the polar regions, and they're visible during the summer months. So we need to get closer to understand something of this climate science and change. So we're working towards understanding this phenomena a little better. But of course, a little bit like Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire, I'm an artist working on this, and I need to be able to conduct the science like all of the scientists. But as Ginger would have to dance just like Fred, she has to do it backwards in high heels looking fabulous. There is an expectation that I too will come up with some way to make this mission fabulous, exciting, and do the science and artwork at the same time. That's the challenge I'm up to. So in addition to that work, I've developed things. I came from a background in drawing and painting, and I've developed micro etchings for JAXA that have been part of an exhibition that has flown into space with a micro etching plaque that was fitted to an antenna on top of the Sprite sat. I've also worked with the European Space Agency as co-chair of the topical team for art and science, developing pathway recommendations and developing a white paper to show various ways and methodologies in which both artists and exponents of ESA can work together towards mutual discovery. I think we're very clear about how artists can illustrate science, but there are also opportunities where artists can be researchers, they can be inventors, they can be innovators, they can be disruptors, they can be hackers, they can be all sorts of things that are really valuable in a space and exploration context. So mapping that out. I've also joined groups such as the Weightless Artists Association, all sorts of groups. One of this is a project that was actually by Astronomers Without Borders, using Cold War technology to beam an optic exhibition off the moon and have it sent back using radio frequencies so that our images show the undulation of the moon as they come back. So we see that distortion much like early television reception. Not that we remember that. But various groups like the Spartan group, the Weightless Artists Association, setting up exhibitions and forums, the Zero Gravity Arts Consortium. There are groups around the world who are using space as an influence or as an inspiration for their work, but also contributing to the development of work. So recently, which is only 3 weeks ago really, I worked with a group at QUT, University in Creative Industries, looking at how we can extend that. How can I develop tools and technologies where I'm interacting with robotic systems to be able to share in these experiences, even of the EVA simulation experiences, not even the real EVA. So I developed a little project called the Agency of Human Robotic Lunatics, and it's a creative development piece where we looked at employing a robotic cinematic system called Cinema Swarm to connect to my gestures so that as I moved here live before an audience, my avatar behind me would also move. In this case, I could develop.
While human spaceflight began many thousands of years ago in our dreams, it continues today with our technologies for embodied visualization.
So I could set up scenarios to describe Project Moonwalk, to describe the various scenes and scenarios in the pool, in the ocean, to describe the interactions there without even the film footage there live with an audience. And also then to be able to translate that further into the imaginative space, because of course, even though you're at depth underwater, even in the ocean, when you're engaged in these systems, you have to put things like divers out of your mind, because divers are not on the moon. You have to be able to dispel belief and transport yourself to these places in order to have authenticity and autonomy and fidelity in testing these systems, which is what I was able to achieve underwater. So bringing that to an audience meant bringing some of that fantasy to the space as well. Now, to finish off, I'm going to leave you with something that was truly inspirational. So a few weeks prior to this work, which really helped, I found myself in Kazakhstan for my first ever space launch, and I'd just like to share that with you because I'm sure you're interested. So I had worked with Paolo Nespoli here in Australia, in Italy, and I had the opportunity to go and watch Expedition 52 leave for the International Space Station. And Paolo's mission at the moment, his Vita mission, is actually linked to the trilogy of uniting science, with education, outreach, and the arts, which I think is fantastic. Well, of course, I'm biased, but I'm very excited about that. So I was able to see the rollout of the Soyuz MSO-5. I got to wave goodbye. I actually got to see them in quarantine as the crew headed out. The beautiful installation on the launch pad. Civilians hadn't been allowed there for many years, so that was quite a privilege. And of course this. And I can tell you, I was not prepared to feel like my heart had gone up there with them. I didn't know that. I looked around and everybody was the same. It was spellbound, but totally transported. You could feel it all the way through. So that's where I'd like to be one day, bringing art to space to arts, and engaging in a practice or a pursuit where arts research in these extreme environments brings new forms of discovery to exploration. And I'd like to, before I head off, I'd like to thank you for having me, but also to officially welcome Peter on behalf of the organisation to the Agency of Human Robotic Lunatics with an official mission patch. The beginning of many things.
Well, if you ask anyone on that, I qualify for the lunatic part of it anyway. Thank you so much. Hey, wonderful to hear. And on behalf of the association, thank you so much for taking time. As I mentioned before, Sarah's literally going to run out of here and go to the airport. We're going to have time. Well, we might be able to arrange to have some questions later on. So let's think about that in the next hour or so. But look, thank you so much for coming along tonight. That would be fascinating. A little bit outside of our normal sort of
figured
sphere,
that from the faces.
But I think you've really opened up some minds here. So I'm aiming to be in the weightless space art group, I think. Thank you.
Thank you much. Thank you. I need to check that out.
So yeah, so with that, what we'll do now is we'll let Sarah pack her things up.
That's yes.
While we get our other systems set up and continue on with the rest of the standard meeting.
How's that sound? How's that sounding? So I don't know what was going on with her before. I'll stand around over here. Is that sound still coming through? Still coming through? Yeah. Talking now? Did you say you were on the YouTube chat or the Facebook chat before? YouTube chat. I just made that folder. I'm sorry. Mine's in August, yeah. Yeah. You've just copied July. Just drag the whole folder on. Yeah. Is it audio thing? Embedded audio. Turn the cable. Okay, so looks like it's up. Just start the video. Welcome everybody again back to our regular programming. Welcome again to the August meeting of the association. We have a more traditional second part of the evening tonight. I just stumbled on this image today. I thought it was really cool. It was taken at Woomera of this hi-fi launch in 2016. Anyway, got a nice round group of things tonight. You've already seen Dr. Jane Pell, which I thought was fascinating. Then we're going to have what we do now, which is a bit of information about what's coming up ahead. And then at 8 o'clock, well, probably 10 past 8, we'll have space news with Angelo and Michael. Then we're going to take a little bit of a break, probably at 8:30, maybe a little bit after that, for having a chat, catching up. Introduce yourself to somebody you haven't met before. If you see someone that hasn't been here before, go and pounce on them and say hello. And then we've got Andrew Rennie, a special feature with Andrew Rennie tonight on planetary science and science update. Andrew always gets a bit of a raw deal. We sort of give him squeezed in amounts of time to show us things, and he's always got way more stuff than can ever be fitted at any time. But we've given Andrew a good hour tonight, so and he's got a stack of stuff there I can see. So with that, we'll get on with the nuts and bolts of tonight. So just some very important housekeeping information. Next month, we're going to move away from the traditional fourth Monday of the month to the third Monday, the 18th of September. The reason for this is we've got a special speaker in town, Tim Parsons. May or may not know Tim. I think I'm dropping in now again. I'll move over this way a bit. So Tim is quite a high profile in the Australian space scene, in the startups, new space, CubeSat sort of area. He's a co-founder at XLab. He's involved with Fleet, a tech evangelist with iFlix, and the founder of Delta V, which is a space startup accelerator group. So this is a bit about the Delta V and some of the people that are involved with that group. The Australian Centre for Space Engineering in New South Wales. We'll talk more about those in a moment. Sabre Astronautics, for those here earlier in the year, we had Dr. Jason Held from Sabre. So, fascinating guy. For those that came to the Australian Space thing that we ran a couple of months ago in May, very animated speaker, really fun guy. So, I think it'd be a really good night. In addition to that, this is still to be confirmed. We may have Kerry Doherty, probably not physically in the room, but we'll have her piped in some capacity. She's just launched a book called Australia in Space, and I'm dropping him out. I must be in that dead zone or something. Who knows? Maybe it's the North Koreans. So she just launched a book called Australia in Space. This is an updated and expanded version of published this book. And so this new book looks like this. It's just been recently released in time for the International Astronautical Congress, which takes place in Adelaide in September. So if you're interested in the book, it's available now. It can be purchased through the ATF Press. I think it's about $70 from memory. 64, is it? Okay, sorry. Plus shipping. Okay, I'm being told by the producer, my off-screen producer, we have a link on our website to be able to go off and purchase that book. So if anyone does get a copy, maybe they can come along and give us a review. In addition to that, in South Australia, Kerry's been heavily involved in this. It's a exhibition called From Outback to Outer Space. So it runs from August to November of this year. Once again, in conjunction with the International Astronautical Congress. So if you happen to be in South Australia and Adelaide during that period of time, make sure you head on up there. It looks fascinating. And she's got a lot of information, artifacts and stories there from stories of the good old days in Australian space. Hopefully we're going to head to a few more good old days in space coming soon. Perhaps not. So listen, I just stumbled across this information today. Sydney's got quite a bit of stuff going on in conjunction with, they've obviously timed it in conjunction with the International Astronautical Congress. They've termed this the Sydney Space Festival. So as you can see, there's a bunch of things happening there. So if once again you're in Sydney over any of these dates, you might want to try and get yourself along to them. They've got an international their third off-Earth mining forum taking place at the University of New South Wales. They've also got the astronaut stories. We've got some of those coming to Melbourne as well, so don't be too alarmed. And there's also this September 22nd Meet the Sydney Space Industry event. First I've heard about that today. I stumbled on it today. So have a bit of a look around. We might make a bit of information on our Facebook page about these things. Right, so I'm just bringing to mind once again the Australian Space Network, that meetup group that we run. We'll put all of this information in there as well. If there's anything you can't remember, just drop an email to spaceflight@space.asn.au and we'll hit you up with all the details. Of course, the International Astronautical Congress, actually Sarah's going to be presenting and speaking as part of that. She's got a keynote speech and a couple of other things she's doing as well over there. So this is the event happening in South Australia, 25th to 29th September. We did send information out a little while ago. There was ways that people could attend without paying the big amounts of money they're running a volunteer program. I'm not sure whether anyone has availed themselves of that or is able to be there. Is anyone in the room going to be at the International? You are? Fantastic. You're going to be presenting? All right. You want to give us a preview of what you're going to be saying and doing? Linear electromagnetic accelerators. Fantastic. Well, maybe you can give us a summary of your presentation at the next at the meeting in October. We'll get the stooges onto you and heavy on that one. Well, fantastic. Well, look, that'd be good luck with that. Sounds fascinating. So we're also hoping there might be some gigantic announcement. But here we go. Stop that again. Oh, double flipping it now. Not sure what's happening there. Okay. This is an astronaut stories that people may have seen out on social media, etc. It's out at ScienceWorks on the 23rd of September. And they've got Tony Antonelli and also Dimitru Pinarui. Romanian, is he? So he completed an 8-day space mission on board Soyuz 6. Well, there you go. So that's our ScienceWorks, and I thought I put the link to the. No, I didn't. Okay, so I think you need to look through. Well, go to the ScienceWorks website. You'll find all the information. Yeah, it's on the Spain Space Network meetup page as well. Just to finalise once again, next month's meeting is being shifted to the left 1 week. October and November meetings are the standard formula, and then we're talking about December already. The December meeting is not the fourth Monday of the month because we'll all be probably unwrapping presents or something close to that, or wrapping presents. So we're on the 11th of December, which is the second Monday of the month. Oh yes, okay. It'll be 18th of December. There was a bit of a discussion happening, and I neglected to update the slide. So it will be 18th of December for the December meeting, but we'll pump out information about it to you. All right. Now, once again, we're still running our campaign to get you all to renew or sign up and do the memberships. I think our membership slid up a little bit. There might be people with their payment, right? Hopefully that's going to happen. And all right, so that's the end of my little part. Now we're going to hand over directly to Mike and Angelo for space news. Do you want to use handheld mic or this one? What do you recommend, Ash? Which mic? The handheld? Jen, need to use this one, okay?
Okay. Looks like I have to hold this very close to my mouth. So how much have I got? 30 minutes. All right. Okay, well, welcome tonight. There's a bit of a slap up today. I've been very busy over the last month, but hopefully I've got enough content to make it interesting. This is what's basically transpired, all the things that took my fancy. There's been a lot more things happen, of course, but I always pick on my favourite topics. But the first thing we'll start off with is Washington Roundup. And the only thing that of great interest that came out recently was that we have very soon an announcement for a new NASA administrator. It's likely to be Jim Bridenstine. He's actually a congressman, and someone might be able to answer the question, but does he have to resign from Congress and to become administrator, or can he take the dual hats? Don't know. Anyway, you don't have to. They have. And be the president of very shortly. I think Mr. Trump will announce their position. That's the last of the issues. Len? Sorry? Aim it at me tonsils. Oh, like that. Ah, now I get it. Okay. Technology is marvellous. Okay, commercial resupply. Couple of key events. And why do I keep focusing on SpaceX? Simply because they're the ones that are doing most things in space at the moment. But we did have CRS-12 recently launched from Launch Complex 39. It's what's called the Block 4 Falcon, and there is one more iteration of that particular rocket to the Block 5, which will be the final iteration of the Falcon, and the reason for the Block 5 will be to satisfy NASA's safety needs for manned transportation. So also use the last new Dragon for cargo flights. What they're going to do now is they're going to actually refurbish the Dragons and reuse them. So I think they've got a stable of about five or six of those. So that should be interesting. They also launched Formosat from Vandenberg, and it's the 12th launch of the year. I haven't counted them, but apparently they've launched more rockets now than the Russians have. I had a slide that I don't have here, but it really just shows the exponential increase of SpaceX launches compared to all the other nations in the world. So it's a pretty amazing feat, I must tell you. Okay, now, somehow or other, I've got to get this to fire up. This is one of the launches. No, it's not going to work. This was taken from Jetty Park. This is just south. This is landing. This is just south of the launch complex, and you'll see it come popping out through the clouds. Amateur photography. So from Jetty Park, you can get a really good view of this, and this is just a public park. Len, if you're fortunate enough to, and this is where they actually bring, when they land in the sea, they actually have the barge come up this canal here. So this is Port Canaveral. This is Port Canaveral, correct. And Mike knows pretty well. Moving on. All right. Fire away. This is the... Now, some people did notice that one of the legs took a little while to actually extend. If you watch that coming down, they all extended just in the nick of time to land, but that was CRS-12. Good landing. This is Formosat. This was launched from... this is a video too. Yep, go on. The last one, it's a good question. Probably a drone. Has to be a drone. This is Formosat going up. Incidentally, Taiwan, some years ago, paid for this launch. I think they were charged $23 million for this launch. So it's a bargain. Real bargain. Those rockets are now going for, what, $60 million a launch or thereabouts. So good outcome. This was a picture of the barge coming in from the Pacific. It wasn't quite a bullseye, but was about 0.7 metres off the bullseye. Not a bad effort. It's about that much. So, pretty good effort. Commercial space, Boeing, nothing much has changed, so I won't go through that. SpaceX, we're still on target for a February 18 uncrewed Dragon launch. There is still an in-flight abort test coming up, and June we've got the manned flight. First flight of men since shuttle in 2011. Various milestones that they're looking at. I'm not going to go through it, but there's quite a series of activities to go through it before they actually get into commercial delivery of astronauts, which is probably later in 2018. And they've been practicing. Looks like it's paper mache. Crew Dragon. General SpaceX. I'm not going to go through all this, but the next one coming up is the X-37B flying in... when is that going to fly? September 7th. Is that the date? Okay. And then in November, probably, we're going to get the Falcon Heavy. And someone asked me before if the the Grey Dragon was still on. I've not heard anyone say it's not, so it's still on, but the Red Dragon, Mars, is off. Now, this was the Launch Complex 39A, probably, I'd say, about 6 months ago. This is what it looks like probably a couple of weeks ago. Have a look at the before and after shot. Oh, the GIF actually works. Wow. Very cute. Anyway, it's coming down at a rapid rate of knots. And the reason why over the last month or so it's actually come down quickly is because there was a lull at the Cape, which meant that everyone was doing all their maintenance, and they do it every now and then, but it was very productive this month for SpaceX. Now, they've got to get that ready for the Falcon Heavy, but they've also got to put an arm, a white room arm, to get their astronauts onto the Falcon. And that was just a cute model. I thought that was nice. You can do that with cotton wool and some lights. Okay, this is Launch Complex 13. It is changing, but what I will, you all know that they're building a pad, the top of the picture. They're building another landing zone, and that's for Falcon Heavy, so that they can land 2 boosters here, 1 in the ocean. However, they've just got permission now to build a Dragon processing facility and test facility. So in this area, I think it's just at the bottom of the picture, they're going to build these particular facilities. Now, they are temporary, I'm told, but they've been given the go-ahead. So it's passed all the environmental reports and stuff. For those that know the Cape, Launch Complex 13 is where the red circle is. And Jetty Park, where we showed you that video that was taken down here, that's Jetty Park there. So they had a nice view of the landing zone. And the launch complex is up at Launch Complex 40, which is just above. Apollo launch sites are at the very top of the picture. This is another video. This was the 1,000th firing of the Merlin engine. Not a bad milestone for a private company. That was probably it. 3-second grab. Now that's not a closed cycle rocket engine, if you can see. See all the exhaust coming out the side? That's part of, that's not what the Raptor is about in some of the new engines. And the Russians have been doing this for years. The Russians are experts in these closed cycle engines where nothing comes out of it except out of the nozzle, and they reuse all the gases. Here's another one. This is pretty good, Mike. This is slow-mo Falcon launch. As it gets higher, the gases expand. Okay, I'll keep moving on this. Which one's this one? No, this is good. This is real good. Watch this. This is the story of the development of the Falcon 9. Who remembers grasshopper tests? This is interesting because these are ocean landings. Before he actually attempted to land on the barges, he did a couple of ocean landings. See, these weren't generally released, some of these photos at the time. You're seeing them now, but not at the time. Here's another ocean landing. That's a bit of a problem one. Okay, this is a test stand for a new SpaceX Raptor engine, and I just thought I'd show you the remains of the test area after a rocket firing. Can't wait to see that engine going. I just like that picture. There's a few versions of this going around. This was a space one. The interplanetary transport system. I thought we'd give it a run. How long have we got? Give it a run. I haven't seen this one before, so this is the interplanetary transporter that will take people to Mars. So how'd you like to be in there for about, how long does it take to get to Mars currently? 6 months? How'd you like to be in that for 6 months? SpaceX. Yeah. All will be revealed, well, not all, more will be revealed in a month's time in Adelaide. So we'll see how the design has progressed in a year. The Interplanetary Explorer, I forget the actual dimensions, I think it was running at about 14 metres or something, but now has been scaled back to a 9 metre configuration because it's what they can actually launch from Kennedy Space Centre and a few other constraints in manufacturing. So anyone remember how many people this was supposed to take? 100? Okay. So we look eagerly towards next month. Then we've got Jeff Bezos, who's his number one competitor, and this is the plant that we all saw, and if you Google Earth you'll see this under construction. However, this is one of the latest pictures of it. It really is a big facility. He'll start, this will be finished by the end of the year, and he'll start manufacturing rockets early next year, New Glenn rockets. Oops, what's that? You want to... Oh no, that's okay. That's the Blue Origin New Glenn rocket. That also lands vertically, so it's about 3/4 the size of the Saturn V, so this will be a bit of an eye-opener. And this is the Google Earth. You'll see the plant in the centre is the actual plant that we just looked at. And down on the bottom, there's another plant called the OneWeb Satellite Company. They're just building right next to it. And that's the current structure, probably a few weeks back. Yeah. About there. No, it's not. No, I hate to tell you this, guys. It's up here. Oh, hang on. Sorry, my apologies. It's up there. It's up there. My apologies. This is where... Yeah. Correct. OneWeb is there in that site. Then straight up, if you go up along this road and you come along the side road up there, you get to the visitor centre, which is about there. Yep. Sierra Nevada. Lots of nice pictures coming out. There is a high definition version of this. If you find it, have a look at it. I couldn't download it because it was on one of these, newspaper sites, but pretty amazing. And they've been running this thing up and down the runway with the view that they should start the airdrops, free flights, very shortly. Do you want to run this little... Okay, here it is. This is really just dragging it along the ground at 60 miles an hour, letting it go, and just checking its steering and its maneuverability.
What's that?
No. Oh, well, there might be. I don't know.
AC car? So I don't see a reason why we need to mark the orange cones on the right.
And there is a line there, but we should take a rundown.
I mean the orange cones, our 10th mile marker.
Oh, 10th mile marker.
Hey, good morning, folks. It's 5:30. We're going to do a cone check here in the room.
All right, let's go.
This is at Edwards Air Force Base.
Take all surfaces to 0. Alright, here we go. You are clear for brake release. That at your airport with that scraper at the front. No. Ranger, we see we'll stop on the ETA,
okay.
And we are now
moving on. And that's what they're really building, because they've got the Cargo Resupply 2 contract, and they're building the unmanned version of this thing, and that's due to take cargo in the early 20s. So you should see this flying shortly. Virgin Galactic, they're about to fire their engines, but that was just the latest picture. Lunar X Prize. And they said they would never extend the date again. Guess what they did? They extended the date to March 18. I think what they did with the various players, and they reckon they can probably get by March next year. One of the entrants, Moon Express, they have a lot of concepts. We spoke about it last month, but they can take your payload. This is a kind of a sample, but they're to exploit resources. What I found fascinating was two of these guys Moon together. They both land. They each race each other. The rovers do.
So a lot of people are looking a little farther into space. The featured story in National Geographic's Space Issue is a look at the Google Lunar X Prize competition and how individuals are paving the way for space travel. Marcus Shingles is the CEO of the X Prize Foundation. He's brought along some really cool devices that are maybe headed for the moon. Marcus, good to see you. Good morning.
Hi, Matt.
Give me the crib notes on the X Prize.
Sure. Yeah. So X Prize is a nonprofit that uses incentive competitions that we leverage with $20, $30 million prize purses to spark innovation to solve some of humanity's grandest challenges.
You asked people to design something that could be a moon rover. You got a lot of different projects working. Some people might hear, why are we developing a moon rover? We've been to the moon. We've done that. What's your answer to that?
Sure. So this is the $30 million Google Lunar X Prize, and the reason we're looking at the moon is because the moon is the hub for new space, for space exploration. There's a lot of minerals on the moon. There's fuel on the moon. The gravity is 1/6 that of the Earth's gravity, so we can use that as a launch pad to the rest of the universe.
And you're trying to promote individual innovation, private companies, private groups funding things like this.
Yeah, that's very important. I mean, the only entities that have ever landed on the moon today are 3 countries, Soviet Union, the U.S., and China.
Right.
So after spending tens of billions of dollars, what we're trying to do now is spark innovation where the machines you see here today are anywhere from $75 million to $10 million. So it's bringing the cost down significantly.
From what I understand, we got 3 of the 5 final projects here.
3 of the 5.
Talk about this one here, because this one seems different than the other 2.
Yeah, so that's interesting because the requirements for winning the competition, you have to land on the moon, you have to travel 500 meters, and you have to send back high-definition video and pictures. And so the strategy with Moon Express here out of Cape Canaveral, Florida, is to actually land on the moon, but you notice this is different. It doesn't have wheels because the way they're going to accomplish the requirements to go the 500 meters, they're going to try to hop after they land. So that's why you see their structure is conducive for that.
This one over here is planning to go up on a rocket, obviously, and then move through the wheels.
Yeah, this is out of Japan, Team Hakuto, and this is the real innovation here is the miniaturization of technology to produce this type of technology that can get and land on the moon.
How are they powered? Just all solar power?
Yeah, solar powered and other forms of energy. The thing that's interesting about this...
Go ahead, walk over
Sure. So the thing that's interesting about the competition is this is Team Indus out of India, and Japan is actually hitching a ride on the space rocket that's going to launch, and they're both going to share that, and then they're going to share the spacecraft that's going to land on the moon, and then they're going to have a race to do the 500 meters.
They're not going to go at it right here in the studio
I don't know,
or anything
maybe.
like that, are they? It seems like that television show I've seen. When is the deadline for these entries to be finalized and submitted?
Yeah, so the deadline is March 31st at midnight of 2018. That's when the competition will officially end.
As a kid who was a complete space geek, I love this.
Exciting
I
stuff,
really
isn't
do.
it?
It's fantastic.
Yes.
Marcus, good to see you.
Pleasure, Matt. Thank you.
And congratulations to the teams who've come this far.
Absolutely.
And again, you can learn more about these projects in the new...
Quick SLS, the internals of it, and that's well into development for the Exploration Mission 1 in 2019, not 2018. They're upgrading B, the flame trench, so that's all getting rich now, ready for Kennedy Centre over the last few years has undergone extensive renovations in a lot of areas, and this is one of those areas, 39B, and you'll see the retracting arms are starting to go up onto the mobile launch tower. This is the vertical assembly building. All the bits, all the platforms are in now for SLS. There is a video showing it, but we won't go through that. But this takes me back to the 1950s. This was a 1950. This was out of the Cape. It was the bumper, V2 bumper. There is a video of that, but I won't show it. And there's more Orion. They've been testing the engines at the bottom now. It's one of them. And this is another video. They've been obviously testing the procedures after splashdown. And they've also been retesting the RS-25, the old... Well, they're not the old. They're the reusable space shuttle engines. Eclipse. I like this because I saw the space station go across it, which is pretty cool. Not a bad image. And then, of course, you get all these various other photos. Fantastic. Again, there's videos there, but we don't have time. The shadow go over the United States. Pretty cool. This was actually good. This is a little CubeSat, and it's a good video, but I won't show it because we're out of time. But it uses water to propel it. And it's actually worth having a look at this at some point. And of course, NASA are talking about nuclear power rocket engines again. So they're in serious discussions with the people that actually made the reactors that have gone into the new American aircraft carriers. So they're pretty serious. And there's some serious players in this. And of course, Gene Kranz turned 84 a few days back. Mission, what was it? Failure is not an option. That's him. And that was just a nice picture of the Cape from the causeway. And of course, my favourite picture, Atlantis. That's great. Can anyone name where that is flying over? Because I have no idea. I've got to put that on as a screensaver. Anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. And there's actually someone in the room that experienced the eclipse firsthand, am I right? And he's lived to survive to talk about it. So maybe we'll have a chat later. So we'll just take 10 to 15. We'll try to get on to Sarah, and I'll get your questions.
If I could ask you before you sit down, to gather around this table here for a show and tell a la primary school. And just be careful you don't walk on the cables over here. You can do, but you won't see the table then, so best stand around here. Okay, won't be long, about 5, maybe 10 minutes here, and then we'll sit down and we'll look at some slides. Okay. Yeah, I know there are some people who have a disdain for slides, but I just simply pointed out to them, well, look, all those showing up on the screen are slides anyway. They're just done digitally instead. It's still slides. Okay, the story of Voyager. 40 years ago, launched Voyager 2, followed by Voyager 1. And I've been following that mission ever since before the launch, because originally the idea of going out to the outer planets is actually fantastic. First we had missions to Venus 55 years ago last week, the launch of Mariner 2. There was Mariner 1 had been launched before in July, but it had crashed due to a programming error. And then the Mariner 2 was launched, and it made a flyby of Venus, and was switched off. That was in December, and then in January it was switched off, having passed Venus. So that was one of the first examples of a spacecraft that was solar sailed. Because what they did was, you can't see it on here, but there's some vanes at the end of the wings. This is basically a Ranger spacecraft. The Ranger to the moon. The missions that failed almost every time. I'm asked to move over here. Okay. Almost every time Ranger failed, except for the last few missions when it succeeded. So it's a great daring thing to launch Mariner to Venus using a Ranger spacecraft, basically. It succeeded enormously. The Soviets had tried with Venera 1 and several others to try to get to Venus, but they had failed. So that's the first mission 25 years, so 55 years ago. Then. The idea of going to the outer planets just seemed like a no-no. Then they came up during the early 1970s with the idea of a grand tour. The fact that you could launch a spacecraft from Earth to go past Saturn, so Jupiter first, then Saturn, Uranus and Neptune. That mission was cancelled. They said, no, we can't afford it. So they came up with a cheaper mission that would go to just Jupiter and Saturn. And they got approval for that. And they kept quiet about the prospect of going further. If they'd mentioned it, they wouldn't have got it off. Well, over here we have some of the press kits for the Voyagers 1 and 2 mission. Voyager 2 launched first, and then Voyager 1 launched second, but overtook Voyager 2 and arrived at Jupiter in 1979. At that time, the only way you could follow the mission was with newspaper reports, which weren't very badly written, and by short clips that were on television news, which at that time arrived by airmail from the United States via London through an organization called Viz News that supplied a visual news package for the television channels. At that time, we decided that this is not good enough. The Viking coverage in New Zealand had been pretty poor, and so we formed an organization called the New Zealand Spaceflight Association with the idea of promoting space and getting it more publicized. As a result of that, we were able to get things like these press kits and republish them in our newsletter and promulgate the idea. So Voyager 1 and 2 passed Jupiter. And then in 1980, I was planning a trip around the world. In those days, you could buy a ticket that allowed you to travel around the world. You can't do that anymore. Yeah, you can't. You go and try and buy an unlimited stocks ticket around the world. They don't sell them anymore. Because of people like me. Anyway, in planning that trip, I was going to go from Auckland to Tahiti, to Mexico, and on to America. And then I got something that normally just goes straight in the rubbish bin, invitations to conferences. And I got one, Voyager, the satellites of Jupiter, in Hawaii, calendar. Hey, that's when I'm going to be on that trip. Okay, we're not going to Tahiti. We'll go Auckland to Honolulu to Hilo, to Kona, and got on the plane, and I was at the conference, and I met all sorts of amazing people, including a wonderful guy who had a chip on his shoulder called Andrew Prentice, who was presenting this weird idea about planets, and he got the cold shoulder. As a result of that, I wrote back several articles for the newspapers with New Zealand Herald about the mission and some of the findings, including the finding of the moons being different sizes of what had been expected. Come the flyby of Saturn, the involvement there for me was, again, publishing the information, giving talks at the observatory, and generally keeping up with things. Then, for the Uranus flyby in 1986, the flyby was quite amazing. Again, not very well covered on television, but we were giving talks at the observatory and so on about the findings at Uranus. We were giving talks over several weeks during the approaches and so on, and the gradual revelations. But yes, there was a certain event happened just afterwards. The point was that, again, the source of information was coming via magazines and releases from NASA and a few little badly edited clips. So, move on. By 1989, I'm living in Australia, and the news coverage here was still pretty bad. However, I had seen in 1980 at the Air and Space Museum this films they were running, which showed something called NASA Select that I'd never seen before. And this was the commentary they were giving during the Voyager 1 flybys of Jupiter, of the flyby and what was happening. And I thought, gee, that's amazing. Wouldn't it be fantastic if we could see that? Well, of course, the flyby of Saturn, presumably JPL did it, but nothing of that appeared on our TV. And then Uranus, again, nothing. And then we got Voyager going past, Voyager 2, in this case, going past Neptune in 1989, and lo and behold, coming into Melbourne via slow scan television along a wire, was slow scan television, and here are some of the tapes that are recorded over several days. First of all at a place at Northcote, and then later at Melbourne University. Then, on the day of the actual closest flyby, Telstra, who that newly invented thing called optical cable, had an optical cable link from Sydney, Tidbinbilla, Sydney, and down to Melbourne. And the only place getting it in Melbourne was their office in St Kilda Road. So, I got an invite to go, along with all the executives and so on. And I was able to plug it into the tape recorder, my tape, and I was able to record full motion video in colour with sound unlike the slow scan that had been going into Melbourne University, which was silent and one picture every few seconds. So, at the end of the night, well, at the end of the afternoon, this is about 4 o'clock, 4:30, 5 o'clock, the executives, it's home time for them. I mean, after all, they paid a lot of money to go home, not to stick around. And I say, hey, but guys, the flyby past Neptune is about to happen, and they're going to go past Triton. Who cares? The beer's run out. There's no more wine, and there's no more cheese and stuff, and and the champagne's gone. Let's go home. And they went. And the guy who's in charge of the building said, you can stay on if you want. Just make sure you close the door when you leave. And so I stayed. And I stayed. And I just kept on feeding tapes into the machine, 3 hours of tape. And it went over the Neptune and headed down towards Triton. And I reckon I'm the only person in Melbourne who saw the Triton flyby in motion. Some people in Melbourne University saw it in slow scan, one picture, another picture, and so on. Okay, well, let's get on to out comes this technology called laser discs. And laser discs had pictures and sound on them. Later on, when they didn't sell very well, what they did was they left the pictures off and just left the sound on it and compacted the disc down from 30 centimeters down to these things, and they're called, just trying to open it, compact discs. So here are these laser discs, and I invested a lot of money into buying a lot of these, and here we have a laser disc on Voyager, and there's about nearly 100,000 pictures on the disc. Okay. And as a result, they also produced videos. And these are all on Voyager, just to brought along a few Voyager things. On the Voyager spacecraft, they put on the thing called the Golden Record that you've no doubt heard about. And later, Andrew Rennie produced this box set, which has the book with all the pictures on it. And it had, buried in there, a CD, double CD set, with all the sounds and all the pictures on it. I was going to show you these tonight, but guess what? The software that's needed won't run on any modern computer. So it's done in Macromedia, which is a software you may not have heard of. So here are some, just very quickly, some of the pictures and descriptions of them that are there. Now, I have been, over the last few days, been copying some of these tapes onto DVD. Yeah, it's okay. You can do it like that. So, on here is one audio CD, and the other one is a mixed data and audio CD. On the booklet, tick means on the list of the songs that are here. Tick means I've played them on the space show over the last 25 years. And I'm going to play some of the greetings in 2 weeks' time. So there we go. Now there's books and things covering it as well, and I've also bought all the pictures. So every picture that Voyager took are on these CDs here. These are CD-ROMs, data CDs. And I won't even try to open them because it takes a long time to decompress the picture, and then you get a black and white thing which you then got to register with other things. So, guess what? the people at JPL have done it. Just before we leave, I used to run these disks from software which computer controlled and would zigzag up and down the disks, playing images in the sequence that I wanted. And this is the software. Remember HyperCard stacks? Well, this has the control code embedded in the stacks and allowed you to run the disks in a very interactive way. So, thanks. All right. I was going to show you a thing about diffraction, but I won't. Last thing, here are the discs I've made from these videotapes, one of which we might get a few minutes to look at tonight. Now, last month I showed you a globe of Pluto. This is it, same globe. But there are now new geological features are now on the globe, especially in terra incognita. And you'll see written here the new feature, and over here another one. And this feature is called Alan Stern 2017. And this one over here is Michael Vincent. And he has written a little code message there. I wonder if you can decode it. Anyway, I interviewed them on for the space show just before their talk in Melbourne, and they kindly enough agreed to sign the globe. So I'll leave that there for you to look at later. But I think now there's lots of books and things about Voyager that have been published that you're welcome to peruse. Please don't take away. So, I'm...
when Voyager moved up to Uranus and confirmed the rings around Uranus.
Yeah.
Predicted, so that was his contribution.
Okay. All right. Let's wish through a quick summary of the Voyager missions. Michael? It doesn't happen instantly. Okay, I thought it might. Right. Now, I'll get over here because that's where the cameras are apparently, and... Right. So when I was a young little rascal in shorts, this was the plan for for spaceflight. And in particular, you will notice. Sorry, I have a. All right, good. You will notice here it says planetary probes starting in 1962. And then out here, starting in 1965, planetary orbiters, lunar soft landing with a mobile vehicle. And then, about 65, deep space probe beyond solar system. Well, that in some ways was rather optimistic, in other ways it was rather conservative. This is from Aviation Week, 1959, June the 22nd, and again it has a prediction about interplanetary vehicles. So we were looking forward to it, and then came Voyager, and the initial plan to go from the Earth to Jupiter, to Saturn, and that was going to be the end of the mission. But guess what? Because Voyager 1 got the correct data at Saturn about the rings, it was able to be diverted in a new trajectory past Saturn, and that threw it on to Uranus, and then on to Neptune. By the way, you notice that Pluto orbits sometimes inside the orbit of Neptune. All right. You won't see any pictures, movies, of the launch of Voyager 1. The time you see it on TV, it's always Voyager 2. JPL does not seem to have any picture movies of the launch of Voyager 1. I don't know why. A recent documentary that JPL produced about Voyager 1 and 2 had to use an amateur video footage, someone took it at the Cape, of the launch of Voyager 1. All the film you see from the official things is Voyager 2 being launched. Here's the Voyager spacecraft. The key thing here is the scan platform, which could be turned in all directions. The antenna usually kept pointing at the Earth, and we have the nuclear power source here, the radioisotope thermoelectric generator, or RTG, and this is the magnetometer boom, which returned a lot of data about the magnetic fields. Approaching Jupiter, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, and notice that there are differences noted in this eternally dynamic atmosphere. Pioneer 11 and Pioneer 10 had been past Jupiter before, but their pictures had been of quite low resolution. So here's the red spot up here, and we've got a white one as well. The wind velocities in meters per second are written down here. Sorry, kilometers per hour, kilometers per hour. So 500 kilometers per hour, the red spot goes around at about 300. And of course I could share with you hundreds of pictures of the planet, but let's move on to a comparison between Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. The red spot's about the estimates keep on varying, but about 3 times bigger than the Earth. So you can fit 3 Earths in there, 1, 2, 3. As a result of Voyager, we were able to work out what caused the coloured bands and the convection cells that are in that, and the rises up. And when it goes down, it heats up and changes colour to red. So the red bands are descending, and the white ones are ascending. The moons, Io and Europa. And we got lots and lots of pictures on approach of the moons moving around. And the discovery of a ring around Saturn. This had not been predicted, had not been expected. And it turns out Jupiter has a ring. And mosaicing a few photographs, we see the ring. Jupiter itself is out over here on the left. Now, important thing to realize is that Voyager did not take color pictures. It had a black and white camera, and it had a filter wheel with clear, red, green, blue, ultraviolet, and it took a photograph, usually through a clear filter, and then it threw each successive filter in succession. And to get a color picture, you then have to take usually the red, green, and blue filter pictures and put them together. However, while it's doing this, Voyager is moving. And when you're a fair way from the planet, it's quite easy to co-register them, match them up. You'll notice here what they've done with the ring is co-registered that, so we see the ring in color, but over here is the planet, which is at a different distance from than the rings, and you see the filters, red, green, and sort of a blue is in there, but it's overlain with the green, so it's looking white. So that's how the Voyager color images are made. From the Earth, a sodium cloud had been detected in orbit around Jupiter. And people couldn't figure out why on earth would there be a sodium cloud. There's a intensity map of the sodium cloud in the same orbit as Io. Well, when we got the decent pictures of Io, no craters. That tells us straight away young surface, because old surfaces have lots of craters on them. No craters there, but lots of features. And then, in the navigation pictures, the navigator, she found on one image, and then she found others, this thing at the side, that's not actually the discovery picture here. It looked more like that there. And she thought, hey, that looks like a moon coming from behind. But then she said, hey, there is no moon there. What on earth's going on? She discovered the volcanic plumes of Io. And during my trip to Hawaii and then to Los Angeles in 1980, I had lunch with her. At that time, she wasn't world famous like she is now. And she told me about how she'd found these pictures and so on. I was with several other planetary scientists as well, and we had a long discussion about finding the volcanic plumes of Io. The volcanoes, by the way, are mostly sulfur dioxide and sulfur. Here's a picture. The black areas are molten sulfur. Now, I don't know if you know about the allotropes of sulfur. There's various states of sulfur, and they are all there. All the different allotropes of sulfur that you can get are there at different temperatures on the moon Io. Comparison between the Voyager 1 flyby and the Voyager 2 flyby, and you see there have been changes in that just those few months. These go a long way into space, and material is picked off that and into orbit, and that makes that sulfur ring that I was talking about. In 1980, I went to Hawaii and to the conference at in Kona, and a storm had just been through, so the storm debris all over the beach and everywhere. But we used to stand out here. It's where I first met Andrew Prentice, down here, or just out here actually, and we had discussions with lots of the other scientists and so on. I had a choice of going on a volcano tour or on a tour to the observatory, and I chose to go on the volcano tour. Why? Well, I lived in a country of volcanoes. I've grown up on the slopes of an active volcano, and of course volcanoes were interesting. And besides that, I taught volcanoes. Go to a Zen observatory? Who cares? Well, that observatory, of course, is Mauna Kea, which since then has grown to an enormous facility, but at that time was fairly small. So anyway, went for a walk, and we walked on this lava field that was only just a few months old. And all these guys here are planetary scientists of various sorts. They had been at this conference. And then, as I was walking along, suddenly the ground collapsed. And I wondered how far is it to the center of the Earth, and is it hot? And it turned out I only collapsed down a little bit. You see my knees are bleeding, because I think that's scoria, that lava, only 6 months old, is very, very sharp. And that piece there, I still have in my possession. The rascal cut my knees. And there's the hole I fell into. So there'd been a lava tube down there. Lava forms a crust, and then the inside's still hot, and it runs away and leaves the hollow behind. So walking on that, boom, it had collapsed on me. So that was my experience of walking on lava in Hawaii. And here's a bunch of us. This is where Captain Cook was killed. And I won't name the names here because I can't remember them, but these are all planetary scientists involved in the Voyager mission. And there was an interesting thing going on in Honolulu. They had this newfangled thing called computer games. And what you did was, you sat on opposite sides of this looking at the screen, and you played your competition by juggling these controls. And that was this newly invented thing called a computer game. And that's the first ones I'd ever seen, the ones in Hawaii. Anyway, onwards with Voyager. Saturn, approach photo. Saturn proved to be rather blank compared to Jupiter. However, the monochrome black and white photos, suitably enhanced, did show lots and lots of features on the surface in the atmosphere of Saturn, including these rivers of material flowing. Now, of course, with the Cassini spacecraft, we're now used to pictures like this, but this is a revelation. So that apparently blank Saturn, in fact, did have detail, but you had to look hard for it. The velocity of the winds in meters per second, and it showed that Saturn, even though it was further out from the sun and therefore colder, actually had winds that were going faster than on Jupiter. One of the little co-orbital moons. And see that dark streak down there? Here it is here. It's moved. And yeah, that blew my mind when I saw that, because guess what that is? That's the shadow of the rings moving across the moon as the moon orbits Saturn. Another discovery by Voyager were the spokes, which were unexplained for many years. Turns out that its electric fields are orienting the particles so that they reflect sunlight. But it only happens at certain seasons, because Cassini has only seen spokes a few times. In 13 years of looking, it hasn't seen many spokes. Whereas Voyager 2 and Voyager 1 going past saw heaps and heaps of them, and got wonderful movies of them, you know, as the rings orbit the planet. Again, the spokes. The rings prove to be asymmetrical. This is one side of the planet, and this is the other side. And you notice there's a mismatch. So the rings are not perfectly circular. And with appropriate filters, you get the variation in the makeup of the rings. Each ring is made of different sized particles. And the discovery of the F ring and the curious braids, which were unexplained for a little while, and then someone came up with the idea, there's another moon out here called Prometheus, just inside there, and another one out here, I think it's called Pandora, and I know I'm losing the sound, and that's affecting the rings. Now, we've seen motion now of that in the Cassini pictures, but for Voyager, it was a bit of a mystery. And there are the two moons that are shepherding the F ring. Comparison between the velocities on Jupiter on the left and Saturn on the right. And you'll see that the Saturn winds are a lot faster. By measuring the light going through the rings, the light from stars going through the rings, you could measure the density of the rings, how thick they are, and to some extent what they're made of. Let's see if I can get more consistency. What am I doing wrong? You'd think that being a broadcaster I'd know how to use a microphone. Alright, Titan. Oh, such things were expected of Titan. And guess what? Blank. It's got a thick, smoggy atmosphere. And we couldn't see the surface. What a disappointment. Looking closer, we can see that the atmosphere's got layers in it. This is the bottom here, and this is up into outer space. And by using the spectrometer on it, we could figure out what's in the atmosphere, and we see lots of hydrocarbons, methane, ethane, propane, and so on. And models were made of the atmosphere, and it looked like there should be clouds of methane underneath the haze. You couldn't see them at the time, but it was hypothesized there'd be methane clouds, and there might even be rainfall of methane on the surface. And I wrote an article in the newspaper based on the temperature measurements, projecting that and looking at the phase diagrams, that nitrogen could possibly be a liquid on the surface of Titan. Well, it turned out there wasn't nitrogen. Now, this is the Voyager picture. This is the one, to me, if I had only one picture from the Voyager mission, this would be it. This so excited me when I first saw it, because for the first time, we had a picture from the other side of Saturn. The view you cannot get from Earth. We had gone past Saturn. That was so amazing to me at the time. Of course, Cassini sent back hundreds of pictures like this nowadays, but at the time, in 1980, this was 81, this was so amazing. So to me, that's my favorite picture from Voyager. Well, we went past Saturn and continued on to Uranus, 1986, January the 24th. And what an amazing picture. A moon. It has a cliff here which is about 7, 8, 10 kilometers high. It seems to have been smashed apart and then put back together again. And look at that cliff there. Look at this wretched gash here. And one of my favourite movies from the mission was when they put together, and it's on the Laserdisc, and I've got it on videotape as well, Miranda the movie. How many of you have seen Miranda the movie? For the first time, nowadays it's commonplace, but in those days they put together this, using the stereoscopic pictures. They did a fly around of Miranda and ended up crashing into the mountain. And so we flew over all the varied terrains of Miranda in the movie. I'd love to show it to you tonight, but I don't have time. Then it was on from Uranus onto Neptune. During the approach, I visited Parkes. Sorry? All right. Good. And I was speaking to the guys there and making notes for a magazine called Space Association News that I used to edit for the Space Association of Australia. And he said, do you want to go in? Do you want to go up the telescope? And I said, yeah. So we climbed in the base, we were up through there and up into the middle. And then up the side of the dish here. And then up the ladder all the way to the cabin. And in that cabin, they had installed special equipment for receiving the signals from Voyager 2 as it went past Neptune. So there we are on the side of the dish. You have to walk up the slope here. And there's the ladder up the side. And here's the guy who took me around. And this is where they played cricket during the Apollo 11 mission. Remember the dish, the movie? And then, I had to climb this ladder all the way up there. And the dish is transparent, so you can see through the dish all the way to the ground. And it was a wet day, it was slippery. So I had to be very careful. Anyway, we got up to the cabin. This is the view from up the cabin looking down on the dish. And that's the receiving equipment in the aerial cabin for receiving the data from Voyager as it went past Neptune. And this was some weeks before the Neptune flyby. So there we are, August 24, 25, 1989. Note the flight path over the North Pole of Neptune, pulled by gravity, down and past Triton, which is in retrograde orbit. During the approach, lots and lots of pictures of the planet with winds going incredibly fast, and instead of a great red spot, a great dark spot. But there are also clouds in the atmosphere which are whipping around at enormous speed. A few the approach pictures at different after one or two rotations, and then you see it's all changed. There's also this feature here called the scooter, which was going around really fast. Some changes in the great dark spot, and this is put together. It's not a single photograph. This is actually 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 photos put together. A polar stereographic projection, you might call it. And there you can see the great dark spot. But coming up was Triton. And this is where I was allowed to stay in that Telstra building in St Kilda Road on my little lonesome. And I was able to watch the flyby of Triton, the only person in Melbourne able to do so. And the pictures that came back were amazing. And I didn't realize it at the time, but later on, I found that there were little geysers, not quite right to call them volcanoes, of nitrogen, geysers of nitrogen, which were caught in the upper atmosphere and then whipped off downwind. And that's what's left these dark streaks here. During the approach, they were wondering what's caused the difference between this terrain and that terrain. Now, I said to Alan Stern that before the flyby, my picture of Pluto it'd be like this. And Alan told me, no, he refused to put a mental picture in his mind of what Pluto might look like. He said, because everywhere we've been surprised. And he says, no point thinking it's going to be like Triton, because it won't be. Well, I reckon there are some features on there that are like Pluto, but not all. So another one of Triton. So this was one of the amazing findings of Voyager. So here we are. Now, we've now got a tour. Compared to Earth, we've been with Voyagers 1 and 2 to Jupiter and Saturn, and then with Voyager 2 only to Uranus and Neptune. Of course, it didn't go past Pluto. Voyager could not go past Pluto, so we had to wait a long, long time. A spacecraft called Cassini was proposed, and it was proposed to have a lander that would go and land on Titan, at Saturn, and that's later became Huygens. This was later became Cassini, and there's Cassini in orbit, and it's released the probe Huygens down onto the thing. And like many of you, of course, I have my name on that spacecraft, and I also have my name on that one as well, courtesy of the European Space Agency. And we'll leave the slides at this point. Now, just give me a moment while I just zero the projector. I think. Yep. Right. So what I'm going to do now is remove the projector out of the way and use the other projector. Now, can you, I'll just put it down beside there, out of the way. Thank you. Now, I've been asked to give a summary of the Cassini mission. Well, 13 years, thousands of photographs. What do you do? For the slide thing, I've got boxes and boxes of slides. All I had to do is sit them out on a slide on a light table and say, yeah, I'll take that one, that one, that one. No, not that one. Yep. And put them in the projector and all in order. For the Cassini one, I threw up my hands in horror and I said, I know what I'll do. I'll do Titan only. So this is only going to be about Titan in 7 minutes or less. So, and they're trying to find it. So, as you said, Voyager couldn't show anything about Titan other than the composition of the atmosphere, and that it was very, very opaque. You couldn't see through it. It turns out that you can see through the atmosphere in certain wavelengths. For example, radio waves, radar can penetrate. But also, some of the infrared radiation, long-wave infrared, can penetrate the atmosphere. And so Voyager has been able to take pictures of the surface. So how are we going? Yeah, just... Okay. Oh, bugger, it doesn't do. Sorry, excuse my language. If I click there, and then control-click at the top. No, it doesn't do that. All right. I'll try Alt. Click at the top. Click down there. I'm trying to select a whole lot of things into. That's not. Make it one long list. I've got a whole lot of slides, and we're just trying to select them all into a slideshow. Anyway, while that's getting ready, with 5 minutes left, Cassini at the moment is orbiting Saturn once a week. And it's going very close to the edge of the rings on the outward pass, and then it comes out and comes inside the D-ring, between the D-ring and the atmosphere, as it does that. and it's been doing this now for some weeks. And on September 15, it's going to make the final dive and impact the atmosphere. There's no way of avoiding it. Since they did the last flyby of Titan several months ago, it has been doomed. It has been committed to doing that. Why are they ending the mission? One is running out of fuel. It's been there in orbit now for 13 years. And if they don't do anything, it will just become a derelict. And the danger is it could crash into Enceladus, which may have life because it has an ocean on it. And it could crash into Titan, which again they don't want to contaminate. Unlike the Huygens probe, which was not quite sterilized properly, but it was a better state of cleanliness than Cassini is. So those are the two. Well, some of the reasons the mission has to end. One, they're out of fuel. If they could just leave it there, it will become just space junk and eventually crash into one of the moons. And they don't want to do that. Okay, are we ready? Right. Let's go. Race 3 minutes. Quick. Where's the little slide thing? Oh, well, we'll just do it this way. That's okay then. I'll just use this. Okay. There's a picture from some distance away by Cassini of Titan. And, of course, in color, don't see anything. And then we look at the atmosphere, like Voyager did, and we see, yes, there are layers there. And going into occultation, going behind the planet, we see, yes. And then we'll use the various ways of looking at the thing, and we find we've got methane and other things in the atmosphere, and we can put it together a composite on the right-hand side there, showing, yes, there is structure and there are things there. And then at some distance away, we start to analyze. I'm afraid this doesn't, I'd have to enlarge this to show up the things, but there are different hydrocarbons there. And this is 1,000 kilometers or more away from the planet. I call it a planet. It's a moon, I know, from Titan. So we're able to analyze with the spectra what is in the atmosphere. Here's some of the carbons that are there. We go from, ethane, and pents, hept, anes, and various combinations. The mass in Daltons is relative atomic mass. Okay, and from that over to work out pretty much what the chemistry is going on in there. I don't have time to discuss that. And another look at the atmosphere showing there is layering and structure in the atmosphere. There's seasonal change as well. Notice that the southern part here is a different color from the northern hemisphere. When they arrived there, it was summer in the southern hemisphere, winter in the north. Now it's the opposite way around. And we're going to look in infrared, and we're going to see structure on the surface. But what it was a bit of a mystery. But then we turned up some clouds. There's lots of clouds here and clouds there. And yes, they were methane, just as predicted by the Voyager scientists. This is a microwave transmission from the surface. Not microwave reflected. This is microwaves actually coming from the surface. And this shows a bit of the temperature on the surface of the moon. And here's some rain clouds. And strangely, some dark shapes, which they weren't sure what they were at first. And this is an evolution of a rain cloud over a period of time. And again, methane clouds here. And most of the rest of the thing was clear on the day that this was taken using infrared. Once again, we find that we're getting clouds, and they're changing of the clouds over periods of time. And the features are now getting names, Mesoramia in that case. And again, methane clouds and strange features. Not sure what they are yet. And then these features change for the seasons. So they're affected by methane rain. So evidence that rains on the thing. Again, we've got changes happening here on the surface. Each one of these circles a change. So there is changes happening on the surface caused by the rain that's happening there, the methane rain. Voyager again confirmed there's methane rain on Titan. Then, two things in this thing. Cat scratches, they were called, because they like the claw scratches of a cat, and looks like river channels. Well, it turns out that these scratches are sand dunes, and the wind's blowing from left to right, and causing these dunes. And of course, the rain forms these river channels. Okay. Go. And the dunes again, and wider view of the dune fields. And these are highland areas. Now, these are radar pictures now, and I point out that in the radar pictures, bright means rough, dark means smooth. And all this area here is these sand dune, these dunes, and there's these brighter areas, including the higher terrain. Now I'm skipping quickly now. Very few craters, but there are a few. And this is an impact crater seen in different wavelengths. And here it's an impact crater, and here's the ejector blanket around. And there's a huge basin here, which there is a lot of debate over that, whether it was volcanic or tectonic. Yep, right, done. Okay. And there were lakes discovered. And, evidence for the lakes came with specular reflection. Sunlight bouncing off one of the lakes and into the cameras of Cassini. And over here, we get specular reflection again, here and here, of the lakes. And the censure of it, which will have to be my last picture, is move. Okay, we'll just, it doesn't want to go any further. There was one other picture there that shows a bright spot, which is the light bouncing off the lake, but then there's a area around it, coloured, which shows that the lake must have waves in it, which is causing a diminishing specular reflection. And so we have a lakes down there, which turned out to be methane lakes, and there's waves in it. So we found out a lot about Titan that we did not know at the time of Voyager from the Cassini mission. So at that point, we'll have to wrap it up, because I am 3 minutes and 45 seconds over time. That's the one. That's the one. Now, yes. So here you see the direct reflection of the surface, and this around here is because of the waves giving diminishing reflections to perpendicular angle to get away. So that's proof not only that there's a lake there, but also there's winds blowing and ruffling the surface up, causing waves.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Okay.